Well, folks, it's so nice to be with you again. I'm back here in my basement boatyard. Over my left shoulder, you can see the line drawing of the Viola 14. And that's the subject of my next project. This next series of videos, I'm going to call the Viola 14 Trimaran conversion. And if you were following me back when I put the Viola 14 in the water and actually sailed the boat, you can see me. It's really exciting, I got to tell you. You can see me in action if you go to, on my website, Captain Boat Builder, if you go to Viola 14 second boat build, that whole series, if you go to number 24, which is entitled Sailing, 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 and if you run through to the 4-minute and 52-second part on the video, you can see some shots of me actually sailing the Viola 14 on the lake. And this was in, I'm guessing, maybe 4 to 5 knots of wind. And the boat performed perfectly. I can't say that I was performing perfectly because my balance just isn't what it used to be. And this is a fairly demanding, narrow boat. So I was sort of racking my brain trying to figure out, how can I get some use out of this boat? How can I enjoy it? Because sailing it as it was just wasn't working out for me. So I hit on the idea of converting it into a trimaran, since it is primarily a sailing canoe pointed at both ends. I started with the designer, Michael Storer, and asked him if the hull itself was suitable for a trimaran conversion, and he said absolutely. And then I went to Chesapeake Lightcraft and talked to John Harris, who is the designer of the conversion package, the designer of the hulls, the amas, and the cross beams, the akas. He also said that this would be an excellent conversion. So that started me on this project. I will be making this conversion over the winter, and I hope you'll follow along. I plan on winding up with a beautiful boat, absolutely beautiful, where I won't have any balance problems. It'll be a true trimaran, very, very stable, and I look forward to some really nice sailing. So once again, I'm starting another project. I'd like to give some credit to Terry Otis at Chesapeake Lightcraft. He has helped me a lot with all of my builds, and back in the very beginning when I built the Sassafras 12, he cautioned me and he said, look, he said, you got to be careful. He said, this boat building is habit forming. And sure enough, he was right. So here again, we're starting another project, and we're going to call this the Viola 14 Trimaran conversion, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for coming back. So folks, again, the starting point of this modification, this conversion, is the Viola 14. If you've been following with my past episodes, you'll recognize the boat, and it's sitting here in the basement on the pool table. And this shot will just give you an idea of how narrow this thing is. And I'm embarrassed to tell you, I just don't seem to have the balance to sail it well anymore. Hence the conversion to a trimaran. But I'm going to be modifying this boat, my favorite, and I'm going to be using, again, this package from Chesapeake Lightcraft. It's called the sail rig, and rather than the sail, the mast, the daggerboard / centerboard, all of that, I have all that in the boat. So what I'm really concentrating on is the part of the kit that supplies you with 2 of these hulls, which are referred to again as amas, and these 2 crossbars, which are laminated, and you can see they have a nice shape. There's a mold for that. Those are called the akas, and as a result, you get a boat that's extremely stable. This kit, again, is primarily designed for kayaks, as you can see in the pictures. These are all modifications of CLC Chesapeake Lightcraft kayaks. But I'm going to be using this kit to modify the Viola 14. So this is the starting point, and we'll see how it goes. I'm quite optimistic. I think this is going to be a great project. So when you order the sail conversion kit from Chesapeake Lightcraft, mostly designed, as I said before, to convert kayaks and regular canoes to sailing vessels, this is what the box looks like. It's about 8 feet long and maybe 3 feet wide, and it's surprisingly heavy. It took a bunch of us to get it down the stairs here into the basement. So when you open the box from Chesapeake Lightcraft, I wanted to show you what's in the box. And as we go along in the different episodes, I'll be showing you all of these pieces as they fit into the construction process. What I wanted to point out now, and I've pointed this out before on other videos, I wanted to just be sure that you appreciate what Chesapeake Lightcraft does in terms of packing. Once again, there's absolutely no damage to any of these materials. You can see that they use... So with my last boat, the PT Spear, I learned clearly that working in a standing position, working at waist level or somewhere near that, was much easier on your back, and it was much easier to work on the boat. So with this new project, I realized that the almas are 10 feet long, and the two akas that I'm going to be making are 12 feet long. And they both required a flat surface and a completely level platform, level in all directions. So I enlarged my table to 12 feet. This takes care of the almas and the akas. I just did it with this OSB and sawhorses and extra legs at the ends to square it up. And you'll notice that at the bottom of most of the legs and at the bottom of most of the sawhorses, I have shims. And I've just used these little shims you can buy at Home Depot, and I use them to shim this up to get the table completely level and flat in all directions. The other thing I found was after a while, excuse me, there was a chance that I was going to kick the shims or pound on the table and they would move. So what I've done is I've glued the shims to the vertical legs, and I've also glued them to the floor so that they really can't move much at all. It's sort of sloppy, but I've been able to secure the shims at the bottom of the legs and glue them to the floor. And I'm hoping when this is all done that they'll just pop right off with a chisel. So this is something you might consider. You might think it's overkill, but believe me, when you're working on a big flat surface like this and you're standing up, it's so much better on your back. Next step is to cover the whole table with plastic. You can buy this plastic at Home Depot. You get great big rolls of it, and it's not very expensive. This will be the base layer, and then there'll probably be more plastic on top of this as the projects continue. You just want to be sure that nothing sticks to the table. Well, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue the shear clamps together. These come in two very long sections that you can see here, quite small pieces of wood, but they come pre-scarfed in the kit. So all you have to do is glue the scarves together. So I've got them laid out here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-saturate them with epoxy, because this is all end grain here, and you'll see how fast it soaks up the glue. So I waited with the first coat of epoxy until the end grain here on the scarves soaked up about as much as I thought it could soak up. And then I put on a second coat. And this may be a little bit of overkill on these tiny little joints, because these are just the shear clamps and they're going to be glued in many other ways. But it's to protect against what they refer to as a dry joint. And this would be a joint where you glue two pieces of wood together, but the grain has soaked up so much of the epoxy that there's not much of a bond. So just 2 coats of epoxy with a little bit of time in between to let the grain soak it up. Not much to show, but the shear clamps are all glued. I've tried to be very careful about getting them as straight as possible. Also tried to wipe away any excess glue that oozed out of the joints. because even though these are internal, they still have to fit, and so it does reduce the sanding. But again, here it is, just the beginning of a very long process, and the shear clamps are glued together. So one of the things that you need to do in preparation for assembly, putting all these planks together, is you need to cut off the little tabs that are all over them that came out of the CNC cutting machine. And these little tabs, you'll see them, of course, they look just like this. They're right on the edge. There, it's finally focusing. And here's another one right here. So you have to cut these things off. And on some of the videos from some of the people who are using these kits and making them, they will, they'll just hit this edge with a small hand block and a little bit of sandpaper. And what I found is that the risk in doing it that way, and this is my own little technique, the risk in doing it that way is that if the block somehow cuts this edge and wears it down just a little bit, then you lose the perfect straight line curve that you get from the CNC cutting machine. And then when you lose that straight 100% even curve, then what happens is the pieces don't fit together exactly right. You want them to fit exactly. And so the reason I've started taking these little tabs off with a chisel is you don't have the problem of sanding this area in here by mistake or this area in here by mistake. And I just use a chisel. I use the flat edge. I put it right up against the line of the hull, and just one whack with a little small ball peen hammer, and these things come right off. I'll show you one that I just took off. And let's see here. They're so small I can't keep track of them. So here's an example of one that I took off with a chisel. And you can see that there's still just a little bit of material there. And you can use a block and some maybe 120 paper and just give that a pass once or twice, again, being very careful not to wear this edge down, not to round it out, so that it'll be a perfect match when you put the pieces together. But the chisel and the ball peen hammer seem to work great, and just a little tiny bit of cleanup with a block and maybe some 120 paper, and you'll be all finished. Well, now I've got everything laid out on the table, and you can see here how nice it is to have a 12-foot table, because you can stretch everything out and you've got plenty of room. So I've got all the planks lined up. These are the top planks. Those are the bottom planks. And what I've done now is I've put some epoxy on the end grain. You can see right there how quickly the end grain absorbs the epoxy. So I'm going to let this sit for about, maybe another 4 or 5 minutes. Then I'm going to put another coat of epoxy on to fill in where the grain has absorbed all of the epoxy. Then I'll put everything together, and I'll be back with you to show you what the sandwich looks like when it's finished. Now we've got 8 panels on the table. We've got 4 on each side. Here with the big curve, this is the lower bow section. There's 4 of those. And here's the upper bow section. There's 4 of those. They're all identical. And you can see that I've used a lot of clamps. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that they're completely straight, that the curves are uniform. And to do that, I found that your finger is quite sensitive. You can tell whether or not the panels are touching each other. So I've gone around very carefully with all these panels, making sure that everything is just stacked on top of the other one, so I could laminate 4 at a time on each side of the table. And here's the lamination over the finger joints. I've got plastic in between all of the layers just to be sure. and a piece of wood to distribute it, and I've got it clamped down very hard, so I should get nice flat finger joints, and the planks are complete. Well, folks, that's about it for today. This is just a little teaser. This is one of the Almas, almost finished. Oh, that's all you get to see. Goodbye. See you next time.